Last paragraph, the second page, by the effect of the strong push applied by the force of will, they get transformed into repentance. Now, he's saying that there is a strong push given by the force of the will. Then the samskaras get into a state of repentance. Repentance is nothing but a jerk to the thought waves, which creates a certain extent, to a certain extent, a state of vacuum within him. Repentance is nothing but a jerk to the thought waves, which creates, to a certain extent, a state of vacuum within him. I ignored really. How are you going to create that repentance? There is the thought waves which is flowing from the samskaras, and when you apply the force of the will and give it a jerk, a push, what happens? The samskaras now come to the surface as repentance. When the samskaras leave their face, there is a vacuum created. The flow from above then gets diverted towards it in order to keep up the uniformity with nature. Thus the thing coming in helps us to wash off the previous effect. This may be taken as a true form of repentance. So true form of repentance ಅಲ್ಲಿ multiple things ಉಂಟು. The first and the second things, second sentences, both are indicating the same, but in the second sentence he is talking about the effect of the first. Now, what is the first sentence? By the effect of the strong push applied by the force of the will, they get transformed into repentance. Now, he has not said what gets transformed into repentance. He's not said that. But all that he is saying is that you use the force of the will and you push that particular thing. A strong push is applied. Now, the question comes, to what is the next question. He is talking about it in the next. A strong push is applied by the force of the will, and that gets transformed into repentance. The next sentence is talking about what is repentance. Repentance is nothing but a jerk to the thought waves. By what is the next question. In the previous sentence, the question was to what. In the next sentence, the question is by what? By the force of the will. When you apply the push by the force of the will onto the thought waves. Now, the thought waves is inclusive of the samskaras and the thought wave, both. Now, clearly it is depicted here that there is a will behind, there is the samskaras next, and there is the thought wave next to the samskara. So, three things are there. There is a will, there is a samskara, and then there is a thought wave. Now, how does the samskara actually get converted into thought wave? Normally, the samskaras are getting converted into thought wave by the vibrations of the soul, which we have read. We have spoken about it. How do thoughts arise at all? Thoughts arise because the samskaras are the covering around the soul, and the soul wants to be pure. So, what happens is the soul vibrates. When the soul vibrates, automatically the wave of vibration passes through the samskaras, and the samskaras, certain aspect of the samskaras, raise to the surface as thoughts. Does it make sense? Now, this sequence. ಭರತ್ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೋಲ್ ಇದೆ, ಸೋಲ್ ಸುತ್ತ ಸಂಸ್ಕಾರಗಳಿದೆ. ಸೋಲ್ಗೆ ಪ್ಯೂರಿಟಿ ಮೇಂಟೈನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಇಟ್ ಡಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಎನಿ ಕವರಿಂಗ್ಸ್. ದಟ್ಸ್ ದ ಒರಿಜಿನಲ್ ನೇಚರ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಸೋಲ್. It does not like any covering. So what the soul does is that the more the coverings, more the intensity of the vibration of the soul. You feel restless. You can just take an example of we all want to breathe in air freely. Okay. Now suppose we are immersed in water. Now to the extent that We are immersed, but the free flow of the air is maintained. We are not so much worried. We will still struggle, but not too intensely. But the moment the head is pushed down and you are not able to breathe, and you don't know how to breathe in water, then what happens? How will you feel at that time? The kind of restlessness that you feel. That's exactly the kind of restlessness that the soul feels when it is covered with the samskaras. It wants to be pure. More the coverings of the soul, more the vibrations of the soul to clear off the samskaras. Now, the soul cannot do anything. All that it can do is it creates a kind of vibrations. When the vibrations are felt, the samskaras are gradually kind of pushed out. This is what happens. This is the usual course, and that is one of the reasons why the main reason why we get any thought. Now, once we get a thought, we then put the thought into the thinking machine and go on thinking about it. That's a secondary aspect. Don't confuse between how the thought originates to what happens to the thought after that it has originated. So, if you can understand this point, then we can move to the next point. Is this clear? Okay. Now, just look at it. If the coverings around the soul is more, what is going to happen to the level of vibration of the soul? Coverings are more.
It will be there, but we cannot feel it.
What will happen to the vibration of the soul? One, it will be there. Second one,
It will try to clear it.
how? It's trying to clear all the time. If the amount of samskaras are less, what happens to the vibration? If the samskaras are more, what happens to the vibration?
Vibration is more when samskaras are more.
If the amount of samskaras are more, the vibrations are more. Now, we might not feel the intensity of the vibration. There are times when we feel the intensity of the vibration. There are other times we might not feel. But the soul will be vibrating intensely. Okay. Now, if the samskaras are less, the need for the soul to vibrate more is not there. So, what will happen to the vibrations?
Reduce.
I don't know why is it so difficult. If the samskaras are more around the soul, it has to vibrate more in order to what? Get rid of it. If the samskaras are less, we just need to vibrate mildly in order to get rid of it. That's all it is. It's something like this. If we have too much of load on our head, we will be desperate. We will be vibrating. We will be restless and stressful inside. Can you not relate to that? When you have a huge amount of loans, we will be restless and pestered in the heart and mind. When will I actually ever going to repay this loan and other things? Suppose you have a very small amount of loan. Do you think that you are going to worry too much about it? It will create some ripple at some time, but not too much. You are pretty confident that you are able to get rid of it in due course of time. Does it not make sense? Very similar. You can take the samskaras are the loan that the soul has to repay. That's all. When the loan is more, we feel more intensely restless. Vibrations are more. When the loan is less, the intensity of the vibration is less, we feel less restless. We might still occasionally feel restless, but not too intensely. Does it make sense? I'm just looking at how you people are struggling to actually just understand this basic concept. But however, what Ganeshan said is also a valid point. When the samskaras are actually more, although the soul vibrates intensely, it might not be felt outside because it is too much of coverings. So the coverings will absorb the vibrational wave. You will get thoughts. In other words, the thoughts actually to a certain extent decreases. Then what happens? It's not that they do not have thoughts or samskaras. It is just that they have become so solidified that the vibrational wave of the soul is not passing through to allow the samskaras to rise to the surface as thoughts. In other words, they will struggle to make spiritual progress because they will appear like dumb. Not because they are dumb without having any samskaras, but the samskaras are so much that and so much solidified that the vibrational wave of the soul, although it is vibrating intensely, it cannot pass through the entire layer and actually creates the thoughts. Does it make sense? So I'll just give you a very simple example. This happens to people who are not very expressive in their life. People who are not very expressive, they go on suppressing things in their mind, in the subconscious. The more people suppress things in the subconscious mind, the more the load of the samskaras build. When the load of the samskaras builds up to such an extent that over a period of time, it becomes so intense that they actually are not even prepared to stand up for the rights of themselves. They will meekly accept everything that happens to them in life. Does it make sense? So there are a lot of people like this who go on suppressing things. When you suppress things, you don't have the energy to fight back, to stand up for your rights. Suppose when these people undergo the cleaning process, what is supposed to happen? What will you see? When they undergo the cleaning process, what happens?
Samskaras are
Samskaras, how? What is happening with the samskaras?
they're removed.
One is partly they removed. The solidity of the samskaras is now coming down. What will now happen? The intensity of the vibration is still
Instead of
there. Now the wave of the vibrations will pass through the load of the samskaras. What happens to the thoughts now?
they will come
It increases. The
more
amount of
in
thoughts that they get increases. Not only it increases, now the thoughts which are now coming to the surface will force them to stand up for their rights. Then what happens? When they stand up for their rights, what is going to happen now? Somebody was suppressing their rights and not listening to them. And these people also just putting up with them. Now they are going to what they are going to do? They are not going to disappear like Bharat.
They will learn to stand up for themselves. They will learn to stand up for themselves.
What will they do? Initially, what will they do? They will learn to stand up for themselves. But when we learn anything first, what is the process that we follow?
We feel discomfort.
We feel discomfort. Anything else?
We don't know if we are doing it right.
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಯಾರಿಗಾದ್ರು? ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ನೀವು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿರೋದು. ಅರ್ಧಂಬರ್ಧ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಿದೆ ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಡಿಸ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಮಾಡಿ.
We don't know if we are doing the right thing.
That's possible. You feel restless. You are not sure whether you are doing the right thing. But what exactly happens when you stand up for your rights? Do you think that the other person is going to freely allow you to stand up for your rights? What will the other person do?
He will suppress.
Use more force. Correct. Now you are learning to stand up. Whenever we learn anything new in life, first we do the thing crudely. First instance itself, we cannot do anything finely. Right? We learn to stand up for ourselves because we are feeling discomfort and the thoughts are now bombarding your mind. So you want to stand up for your rights. What is going to happen is you are going to learn to stand up for it crudely. When you learn to stand up for it crudely, you are likely to get into argument and fights with the other person. There is one Abhyasi who's noticed the pattern that every time he comes and takes sitting, see, he goes back home, he fights with his wife or somebody. So for the last few weeks, he's been refusing to come for sitting, saying that I have noticed this pattern. Yesterday he opened up and said, I have noticed this pattern that every time I come and take the sitting and go back home, I end up fighting with somebody. So I don't want to fight. I said, Are learning to fight with your wife and learning to stand up for yourself is a good thing in marriage. And now he started singing a new raga, which is that I will also bring my wife with me for the sitting. So that if both of us get cleaned, then the chance of fight is less. This is his explanation for that. Can you see? I have another Abhyasi who comes. For major part of the life, this Abhyasi has been so meek that the Abhyasi actually literally shivers in front of his mother. When the mother is like 84, 85, she herself is dependent. But this fellow, whenever mother calls, this fellow is shivering. That is the amount of fear that is there in the mind. Because of that intense fear and the suppression over almost 30, 40 years of life, he's never actually learned to stand up for himself. Now, when the work started, the samskara started getting cleaned. One of the things I told him to observe is that you will start fighting with others. And I told him that if you start fighting with others, that's a good sign that you're progressing. Then I got to know from other sources, now he's learned to stand up for himself. Courage is developing. That anxiety is disappearing. The courage is now developing because he's able to stand up for himself. And no matter who is it, he's able to stand up to himself. He's had few fights with his wife. That also I heard the stories. I said, Bhesh, very good. And I told him the real thing is that how he deals with his mother, that would be the real thing. To what extent his fear is gone now. Can you see what is happening here? The samskar, the intensity of the vibration was very high, but the samskaras were so solidified that this person could not feel the intensity of the vibrations and the thoughts were not raising up for standing up for himself. Then what happens? Over a period of time, the intensity appears to have become muted. Then after that, the soul again will start vibrating once it sees that there is a way out of this. It starts intensely vibrating, you start getting more thoughts, and then you start getting that energy and the courage to learn to stand up for yourself. Of course, initially you will learn to stand up for yourself crudely. That will end up in arguments and fights. However, when this urge of the soul to get rid of the samskaras persists and thought waves arise, now you will learn to handle it. Now that the courage, along with the courage, some degree of wisdom also will start coming. Or rather than handling these things in this way, let me handle in this way so that the amount of distress or the fights that is created or arguments that is created is minimized. It's not that you're going to stop again standing for yourself. You will to do it, but now you will do it with a finer method rather than a cruder method. That is what happens. Does it make sense? So I will pause here. Any questions you can ask, and then we'll go back to this particular paragraph.
Yeah, one question, brother. You said soul vibrates. Can it be felt?
It can be felt indirectly in terms of the thoughts that you get. But as you become more sensitive in spirituality, the intense vibration of the soul is what is felt as craving or restlessness. What is craving or restlessness? That is nothing but the intense vibrations of the soul to go towards the center. That is what is felt as restlessness or impatience or the craving. We keep talking about the craving, no? How do you experience the craving? The craving is a kind of a vibration, intense vibrations inside, which creates a feeling of restlessness. For what? To go towards the goal. So you can look at Bharat in 2 years down the line, how much intensity of vibration will be there. For what? For going towards the goal. What is the goal? I'll leave the question open. What is the goal? You can see these people in people who are coming up to 30, 32, who are not yet married, and they are desperately looking for marriage. Whatever may be the desperation from inside, but somehow some things are not happening. That is the intensity of restlessness or the craving that you feel. See, when things happen fairly easily, you don't feel that amount of craving. When things do not happen in the way so easily, the impatience or the restlessness that you feel for the thing to happen increases over a period of time. And when it increases for a particular activity or particular goal, we call it as craving. We say that alcohol patients crave for alcohol, right? So they will make the sky and the earth one in order to get a sip of alcohol. Right. How do they make it? They will go to any extent. There are people who tell lies, there are people who actually steal, there are people who sell things in the house, there are people who beg other people for a drink. Why do they do all these things? Because of the intensity of the craving. Now, what is the craving? The craving is for the alcohol. Now, we just now said that the craving is something that you develop when you become spiritual. Now we are talking about craving for alcohol. What is this? When the mind becomes fully saturated with the thought of alcohol, now that alcohol thought related issue now starts penetrating to the deeper core of our existence. Then the intensity of the vibration of the soul now gets mixed up with this thought of alcohol. And now you feel that you are actually having craving for alcohol. Nobody can have any craving for anything in this world. That's the truth of the matter. The only craving that the soul has is for it to go back to its original condition, merger with the center. That is the only craving that the soul has. However, depending on what thoughts we put into the subconscious, this vibration of the soul gets aligned to that particular thought, and it appears that you are actually desperate for that particular thing. So if the idea is about marriage, you become desperate about marriage. If the idea is about job, you become desperate about job. If the idea is about alcohol, we become desperate about alcohol. It doesn't matter. The vibration is the same inside. The intensity of the vibration is the same. What it gets mixed up with depends on what we have put into the subconscious at that particular moment in time, at that particular phase of life. Can you see? This is also something which is experienced as viraha. ವಿರಹ ವೇದನೆ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆಯಾ? ವಿರಹ ವೇದನೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ವಾ? ಗೊತ್ತಿರುತ್ತೆ. ವಿರಹ ವೇದನೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ when you have loved somebody and you are desperate to meet them, but in spite of all your efforts you are not able to meet them. It appears as if the heart is getting squeezed at that time. So there is something called as pangs of separation. That pangs of separation is what you call as viraha vedana. You want to be in the proximity and the company of your lover, but for some reason it is not happening, and you are desperate for that to happen. You are desperate for you to be in proximity of the lover. However, much you try, it is not happening. And you are separated from the lover. You are away from the lover. Then the condition of the heart is that it feels pangs of separation. The pangs of separation again is nothing but the intensity of the vibration of the soul. So the vibration of the soul is now so intense, it gets aligned to the thought of wanting to be with the lover. But it's not able to do so. So the vibration is intense. You feel that intensity of the vibration being more now. That is what is called as pangs of vibration. PANGS. ಅಲ್ಲ, ಯಾರು ನಂಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಿರಲ್ಲ, ಯಾರು ಯಾರನ್ನೂ ಲವ್ವೇ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ವೇ?
We don't know the meaning.
We don't know the meaning of it. Have you felt it though? Now that I have explained.
Subjective to every person.
Subjective to?
Every person.
Is there subjective to heavy?
Every person.
That's correct. It is subjective, but the way it is described is the same. Even Babaji has written about it, that when you are away from your beloved, then you are feeling that pangs of separation. The pangs of separation, the reason for that again is the same thing, the intensity of the vibration of the soul. When the soul vibrates very intensely, you can see that you are so desperate to come to the proximity of the lover. This is the story that even Daji has written in Spiritual Anatomy. That there is a stream flowing and your lover is on the other side of the stream. In the middle of the night, you want to cross over and meet your lover. What happens? You do not even look at what is happening in the stream. You overlook everything. You start stepping on the stream without knowing that there is a stream, and you step on the body of the crocodiles and you cross the stream. Because at that time your heart is so desperate to meet the lover that it doesn't see anything at all. Everything is perceived as something as an aid for your meeting the lover. Then your lover is on the first floor. You start catching hold of a particular thing, thinking that it's a a plant which can support your weight and allow you to go to the first floor. Then you go to the lover, you meet with the lover, spend some time. After that, you need to come out. You come out in the same way as how you went, right? Because you went in secrecy. Now you want to come out in secrecy. Now while trying to come out, that nasha of that separation is now gone. Now you try to get down from the balcony and you realize that what you thought was a rope that helped you climb up was a snake. And now you don't want to get down. And then for some reason your lover says, okay, I'll give you something to go down. So you take that and then you come down. And then what you thought was as stones that help you cross the stream, now you realize that there are crocodiles. Now you don't want to cross the stream. Can you see? That is why in spirituality, in order to overcome all the barriers that we face in spirituality, you need to have unsurpassed courage. Courage, blind courage that blinds you to all the risks that you are taking. Then all the risks that you are undertaking becomes an aid for your journey. because of the courage. If that kind of a indomitable courage is not there, then at every step of the way, you are always thinking whether should I do this or not do this. You know, one of the things I told this person who said yesterday that every time I come and take a sitting, I fight with my wife. What do you think I said to him?
You don't have courage.
You don't have courage.
I did not say that you don't have courage. I said that for spiritual journey, courage is an indispensable part of it. And you need to develop that courage. It is necessary that's a part of the journey. That's why many people take a long time to go from the fourth point onwards to the sixth or seventh point. No, most of the people are traveling between fourth and fifth, many times. They rise up to the fifth point, then there is what is there with the fifth point?
Turbulence.
Turbulence of what?
Confusion. Confusion.
Confusion is there, but confusion is secondary to something else. He said turbulence. Turbulence to what? Turbulence of what?
Samskaras?
Clarity. Clarity.
Sorry?
Clarity.
Turbulence of clarity. Then where is the confusion? You said confusion is there, but I'm just asking you, why do you feel confusion there? He said turbulence. Why do you feel turbulence?
All the suppressed samskaras that have suppressed our courage comes out.
There is something else in the fifth point. The fifth point, there is intense emotional vibrations. The turbulence is created because of the vibrations of the emotions at the fifth point. It is emotional turbulence.
Mm.
Until unless you develop sufficient courage at the fourth point to be able to handle this emotional turbulence at the fifth point, you will always struggle. You feel a bit courageous, you go towards the fifth point, there is turbulence of emotions, you come back again at the fourth point. I cannot face these emotions. This is what happens. So you keep yo-yoing between fourth, fifth, fourth, fifth. It is called as emotional lability. There is intensity, there is increase in the intensity of the emotions temporarily. Intensely you feel hunger, you feel angry, intensely you feel happy, intensely you feel sad. All these things will occur. This is called as emotional lability. So there is sudden intense burst of emotion. And many times, until you have developed a good amount of courage, you are not in a position to handle these emotions. So you now come back to take the comfort of the confidence. If you do not have enough courage and you are subjected to emotional turbulence, you come back to the fourth point to take refuge in confidence. Because you are worried that if you still are there at the fifth point, you lose confidence. Does it make sense? So you take the courage to move to the fifth point from the fourth point. After you have gathered sufficient courage, you go to the fifth point, there is emotional turbulence. Now you are worried that you might lose self-confidence. You will come back and take the refuge of the self-confidence. So this continues for some period of time in many abhyasis. After that, when sufficient amount of courage is now gathered, you learn to handle the emotional turbulence in better ways. When you learn to handle the emotional turbulence in better ways, without getting impacted, you don't lose confidence. Now you are confident that you can actually make the next part of the journey. It's like when you are driving the car, You drive the car, and as you drive the car, you develop confidence. When you develop the confidence, then you develop courage after that to press the accelerator. If you're not driving the car safely and you're not developing confidence, you will not press the accelerator. Suppose you press the accelerator and you go and hit something. What is going to happen now to the confidence? Confidence is gone. It goes down. Right? Next time again, you have to drive some amount of time to redevelop the confidence. And then only you will be able to press the accelerator. Otherwise, next time when you drive the car, you will be reluctant to press the accelerator. Can you see the relationship between confidence and courage? When there is sufficient amount of confidence, you develop courage to do something. When it happens all right, then the confidence increases. And courage also goes up. But suppose something happens, now the courage is to press that accelerator is not there. So the courage is gone. Not only the courage is gone, it also takes part of the confidence with it. Now, next time around, you have to try to do the same thing all over again. Can you see? Agidya, whenever people meet with accident, no, they are very reluctant to drive the vehicle for some period of time. Their confidence goes down for some period of time. Till they drive for some period of time after that with lesser confidence and then develop that courage. Okay, I'm able to drive safely. Then they will regain that confidence back. This has happened to everybody. Right? Okay. We have not even managed to finish one paragraph also today. And that's an achievement. But you can see